Welcome to our next video in the series on construction of a maple redwood ukulele. In the first video we gathered the material and talked about the advantages of good planning so you avoid some of the pitfalls you're running into. In this video we're going to discuss thicknessing of the material. Now thicknessing is actually an entity unto itself. There are so many different factors involved. It depends on the size of the instrument that you're going to build. It depends on the type of wood that you're using. It depends on the characteristics of that specific piece of wood, the closeness of the grain and the stiffness. It depends on what type of bracing material that you're going to use, and it depends on the bracing pattern, and all those things work together to create the tone and the volume of the instrument. So one of the best things I can advise is take a look at the internet. There's a lot of great information, a lot of sites where builders are really happy to share information. I belong to Ukulele Luther's site, and that's a great source, a great resource for answering questions. Also take a look at Robbie O'Brien's website. He's just got a ton of helpful information on specific construction features. Here's a look at all the material we're going to be using to build the instrument. It's really interesting to look at it this way, but don't let it overwhelm you. It looks like there's a lot of things going on, and there are a lot of things going on, but don't worry about trying to copy down a list. I have attached a PDF file with a list of all the material for this instrument on the description of the video. And the thing to remember here is that is the list of material for this specific instrument. Yours will most likely be different. Some of the things on there are obviously optional, like the preamp and some of the bling, like the Abalone. And so it's really only for reference and just to give you kind of a visual idea of what goes into the build. So for this project, I'm going to what I like to do for thicknessing first is take one side and sand it to almost what the final sanding will be. That way when I'm doing the final thicknessing, I can work on just one side and I don't have to worry about having gouges that I have to take off on the other side. And so what I'm going to do is run these pieces through my thickness sander first, and then sand them to 120 grit with a random orbital sander. And then on the soundboard, I'm going to put in the Rosette. And for the top and the back, the redwood is a fairly soft wood, so I'm going to keep that at about 2 millimeters. And also the back, I want to keep about 2 millimeters. And for the sides, this is a figured maple, which can be rather tricky to bend. So I'm going to sand these down to about 1.7, 1.8 millimeters before I try to bend them. And I might make some adjustments on the way, but you kind of get to know by the feel of the wood if you're in the right area. Or like I say, shoot your questions out there. There are a lot of places that are really willing to help. So let's run these through to do some sanding, and we will take it from there. Now that we've run this through the thickness sander, I'll use this orbital sander to sand to a 120 grit. To install the Rosette, we're going to use this Dremel tool and the circle cutting attachment, and this requires a little bit of setup. It's always a good idea to drill a test hole, and you can see I did that here. And It may be a little bit big at this point, but that's okay because once I start cutting in the actual soundboard, I can always dial it in, make it a little bit smaller. It's easy to take more material off, real difficult to put it back on. So the other thing you want to make sure of is that you don't make your slat deeper than the material you're going to use for the rosette. And yeah, so double check to make sure that you're not going to have a slat that's too deep. We're ready to make the first cut in the soundboard. Always start and stop your tool underneath where the fingerboard is going to be. That way, if it goes a little wonky, you won't have to try to repair any damage. Also, this particular tool does not have a plunge feature. We're not making a very deep cut, but it is going to go down once we start it. So I'm going to make one clockwise circle, and then I'm going to turn off the router, wait till it completely stops before I take it out. I'm going to make a few more passes here, working toward the outer end of the channel, and then as we get closer we'll dial in the exact inner and outer edges of the channel. I've got the channel cut for the abalone, and I've dry fit them in there. I'm going to use CA glue to glue these in. And I haven't worked with Redwood before, but I know that CA glue has a tendency to seep into the wood and it can discolor. So I'm going to give it a coat of shellac to seal it before I glue in the abalone pieces. Okay, I'll let that dry and then we'll come back and glue in the abalone pieces. Oh, I like this redwood. This is going to be a very pretty instrument. Okay, the shellac sealer has dried. I've got the pieces kind of in place here where I want to glue them. Of course, this is going to be under the fretboard, so you don't have to worry about putting a piece up here. You're just pretty much wasting material. And so I have these dry fitted, so I'm going to go ahead and fit them in there and then put the CA glue in. Okay, now I'm going to take and fill that channel with a thin viscosity CA glue. And then for good measure, I'm going to take it over to my go bar clamp and put a caul on this so it can dry. Okay, we've got this over by the go bar, and got a piece of wax paper here to keep it from sticking to the caul. So we will put this on here. And carefully place these things on here. Okay, we'll let that dry and then continue the project.